This is part 3 of the bicycle saddle project video. In part 2, we made the seat surface of the saddle, and in this part we will make the swept mounting rails on the bottom and the anchor blocks that attach the rails to the seat. We will also be adding a little side decoration to the side of the seat in the nose area. You recall in the last part I skipped over steps 3 and 4, which are the layout sketches for the rails. So I'm going to roll back to step 3 to show you how those are made. Making my guideline images visible, you can first see that we have the guideline sketch for the front view of the rail and the guideline sketch for the top view. These have been made very transparent right now so that I can easily see what I'm sketching on as I'm doing the sketches. So I'll roll down now to step 3. Edit that sketch, which is the top view of the rail, and this is the sketch that I have to make for later use when making the actual rail sweep. For some reason in my case I made the top view layout first and then the front view. Doesn't matter which one you do first as long as you take care that all the key points are aligned between the two layout sketches. In my case I just carefully followed the underlying image and use that as my guide to make my rails, but you can alter this a little bit. The most important section that you don't want to alter is this straight section here, which is 110 millimeters starting from the nose and is 100 millimeters long. You can adjust this a little bit by a few millimeters at either end, but not much more than that. The other critical dimension to worry about is this 43 millimeter dimension, which is the dimension from the rail to where its mirrored twin is going to be on this side. This part of the rail here, 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 and here can be adjusted a little bit. For example, the 20 millimeter dimension between the two rails can be changed a little bit at the nose, or the 60 millimeter dimension here at the tail can be changed, as well as the length of these sections here, which will be going into the anchor blocks. Closing the sketch, we'll take a look at the front rail layout. It also may be useful to have the front layout sketch shown while you're doing this to make sure that you don't have the tail of the rail or the nose of the rail somehow misaligned with the actual seat. Again, the important part of the rail is going to be this upward slope section, and you can see that I pretty closely followed that faint underline that's coming from the guideline image. This is at a 5-degree angle. The other important thing is, once again, to make sure that these corner points on the rail path all align with the same corner points in the corresponding top view layout. One way to do that is simply make a vertical relation, for example, between this point in the sketch we are working on and this point in the previously made top view layout. Sometimes people find that confusing. What can help them a little bit is to draw in vertical construction line going from the point that they want to be aligned. Let me just take out the vertical alignment here to start with. So what you can do is draw in a vertical construction line and then use that to make a coincident relation between this point in the top view sketch and this end point of that construction line. So I'll click on this point here, make a coincident relation. You can see how that's pulled this point in alignment with the corresponding point in the top view. Some people find that to be intuitively a little easier to understand because they can more directly see how the alignment is being achieved. If I've done my alignments properly, I should be able to look normal to my front view. And I should be able to just roll that view downward see how these points are the same distance away from the origin in this direction. And I can see how these points are aligning as I roll it down. See how they cross each other. So if two corresponding points pass over each other as I roll the view like this, that should mean that they are the same distance away from the origin, meaning that they are properly aligned with each other. Although I've indicated several times that we don't want to change this 5-degree slope on this section of the rail, it is okay to move this section up and down. So I can make the rail a little farther from the seat, or I could tuck the rail a little bit higher up into the seat, but you see that this 5-degree angle is still being maintained. I can also adjust where the rail anchors up into the seat at the tail and at the nose. So I can take this dimension, modify this a little bit, move that up, or move that down. But what I want to do is make sure that this section is well within the seat, because we have to have an anchor block that can also be contained within the seat. I've also taken care to draw the actual anchor block in this layout so that I have a good idea as to whether or not the anchor block will fit under the seat surface. This makes sure that I've given enough room for the anchor block both above the block and below the block. You see what I've done is I've made the bottom part of the block about 5 millimeters below the center line of the rail, and between, say, 8 and 11 millimeters above it, whatever is necessary to be able to attach it near the top. Here we have less room for the anchor block, so the portion above is smaller, but I still have 5 millimeters below the rail for the front anchor block. I've also made the anchor block go just a little bit beyond the rail, about 1 millimeter past the end of the rail. Your anchor blocks might be longer or shorter, or they might be a little further into the nose or further out of the nose, depending on where you decided to put your actual rail. Make sure that the top of the anchor block is several millimeters below the top of your seat surface, at least say 4 millimeters gap here, and make sure that the bottom of the anchor block is at least a little bit above the bottom edge of the seat. Now I'm going to close the sketch and then roll the model forward and show how to turn these sketches into the mounting rail. So rolling my feature tree forward, I can see the seat that I had previously created. Now it's time to make a projected curve out of these two layout sketches that represent the rail. On the front view, I'll make a sketch, and I want to copy this line into my new sketch. So holding my Control key, I'll just click on these elements, convert entities, and complete the sketch. On the top plane, sketch, I actually want to use the entire sketch here. So in a case like that, I can just click on the sketch in the feature tree. It'll highlight the entire sketch. Click on Convert Entities. That copies all the entities for me. I could have done that with this sketch as well, but then I would have to have deleted these extra lines. And I'll go into my Insert, Curve, Projected, and we'll select these two sketches that I just made. That gives me my projected sketch, which represents the true 3D path that my rail is going to be sweeping through. So if this is going to be my sweep path, I need to have a plane where the sweep profile will start on. I'm going to start my profile right at this end of the sweep. So I need to make a new plane that's going to be going through this point and parallel to my right plane. That's what I've done here in this step. So I've clicked on the right plane, and instead of clicking on the endpoint of sweep path, I've actually clicked on the endpoint of one of the sketch entities that was used to make the sweep. So this way my plane is tied more to my layout sketches rather than to the actual sweep. So if for some reason I have to delete this projected sketch and remake it, I don't have to worry about this plane being deleted at the same time. Before I can make my sweep, what I want to be able to do is round out the corners, these sharp corners here of my path, so that I have something that looks more like a natural bent piece of rod rather than a rod with unnaturally sharp corners. To do this, we're going to use a 3D sketch. We're going to copy this path into that sketch. We haven't used 3D sketches before, but that's found under the sketch pull down here. So I go to the pull down, 3D sketch. We are now in a 3D sketch environment that allows us to sketch in the X, Y, and Z axes. This can be very difficult to do, but it's easy to use if all you're doing is copying elements into the sketch. So we're going to do this by clicking on the projected sketch in our feature tree. This is the easiest way to do it. Simply clicking on Convert Entities. And that copies the entire sketch into our 3D environment. Now we can go to our fillet tool, start adding fillets at these intersections. I think we want a fillet of about 20 or 30 millimeters. Just click at each intersecting point. That gives us now a smooth 3D path with blending fillets at each intersection. You can use any radius you want here, but it can't be too small. If it's smaller than the diameter or the radius of the rod that's going to be swept, then the sweep will fail. At this point, it's probably a good idea to hide the original projected rail curve so that we're only seeing the 3D sketch that we made with the corners. I'll even hide this layout sketch and this layout sketch, just leaving me with my 3D rail. And on the plane I created for the starting of my sweep, I will draw a new sketch. This is nothing more than a circle. I want to make this circle 7 millimeters in diameter. And what I want to do is add a pierce relation between this point and this section of the 3D sketch. So holding down on my control key, I'll click on this center point of the circle, and I don't want to click on this point, but click on this line and pierce. Finishing the sketch, I now have the elements that I need to make my sweep. Go into Features, Swept Boss Base. For my profile, I select the circle. For the path, I select the 3D curve. See the highlight, finish that. Now I have the mounting rail on one side of the seat. You'll notice now at the top of the feature tree, I have a new folder that says Solid Bodies with a 2 in parentheses. That means I've got 2 separate bodies in this model now. I've got the body that represents the seat and the body that represents the sweep. To get our other rail, of course, we will be mirroring this. Select Mirror, use the front plane as the mirror plane. Instead of features to mirror, we want to use bodies to mirror. So we're going to mirror this body here, which is floating disconnected from the seat. We see when we do that, the solid bodies now says 3 in parentheses. So we've got the seat, our first sweep, and the mirror. The next 2 steps are the rear and front blocks that will anchor the rails into the seat. These are simple extrudes using the up to surface option. I will demonstrate this with the rear block. On the front plane, make a new sketch. Make your front layout sketch visible that has the outlines of your mounting blocks. Now just simply convert entities on the block entities. Check mark. I've got the 4 sides of my block. I'm using extrude and changing to up to surface. In direction 1, I'll go to this surface, and in direction 2, I will go to this surface. When I make this block, we'll bind together the rails with the seat back into a single body, so the folder that said 3 bodies in it will disappear. I want to make sure that this upper line of the block is a little bit below this center line of the seat bottom. If it's a little bit above, the up to surface option may fail. I'm going to do the same for the front. Edit my sketch. I've made an extrusion going up to this surface and up to this surface. The last thing I've done to refine the mounting blocks is to just add some fillets to my edges to get a little bit of a finished look. And you can see here, because I purposely made the block a little bit lower than the undersurface of the seat, there's a little area here that's not actually contacting the seat, so this is sort of bridging across a little bit. The last step is going to be to add some decoration on the side of the nose. It could be some graphics or a logo or just a simple word. I'm just going to add a simple word on the side here, rolling this forward. You see what I've done is just put DSID129 Fall 13 on the side. I've accomplished this by adding a sketch plane, which is well outboard of the side of the seat. We will use this plane to do an extruded cut into the side surface, and it will be a very shallow cut that will barely go into the side, but it'll give us the opportunity to change the color of the cut to create a contrast. So let's take a look at how we might make this sketch. I'm just going to roll this back and remake the sketch. Going on the normal plane. If I want to add a graphic with text, first thing I'd like to do is just add a center line. This will act as a baseline for the graphic. It also allows me to create a dimension that can control the vertical location of that graphic. So I'll make this about 24 millimeters. Now I'm going to click on this A symbol, which allows me to add text. And I'm going to, in the curves box, click on this center line. That'll anchor my text down to the center line. And I can now type in DSID129-FA13. And I have a choice of changing the font or making it bigger or whatever. So right now it's defaulting to the document font. I'll uncheck that. Check on font. First thing I want to do is maybe make this bold and make the height of the font taller. So let's make this about 5 millimeters tall. Click on OK. Now we have something that will be a little bit more visible. Maybe make this italic. And finally, maybe we'll move that up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is an extruded cut into this surface. Extruded cut. Instead of blind, I'm going to use the option offset from surface. I want to go just a little bit into the surface. So I'll pick something like 0.1 millimeters, a very small amount. And I'm going to click on this surface. Zooming in on this a little bit. Got a toggle here that says reverse offset. So the offset can go 0.1 millimeters this direction off of the surface or 0.1 this direction. Right now it's not quite clear whether it's going into the surface or not. So if I toggle this, we see it go a little bit farther over. So we know that the previous selection was a little bit off the surface, and now we're bearing a little bit into it by a distance of 0.1 millimeters. Click on the check mark. We can see a very shallow cut into the surface. We could even make it smaller if we wanted to, as little as say 0.01 millimeters. Our goal is to make it look like a graphic that's been applied to the surface. Now we see it still has the same color as the surrounding seat surface. So click on the feature we just made, right click, go up to this multicolored ball, go down to the pull down. We're going to change the color of the feature that we just made. This is this cut extrude 1 here. I'm just going to change this to a color like purple. Click on my check mark, and there I've got this feature has a different color from the rest of the model. If I click on these double arrows, I can see now that a color has been applied to this particular feature. And that completes our bicycle saddle project.